Welcome to Unraveling the Secrets, where we explore the connecting links between the pernicious deeds of a group of secret society outlaws who are creating a tightly controlled world society with them as bosses and you and I as slaves to their system, popularly known as the New World Order. Research indicates that most of the unexplained craft we see in our skies are from somewhere on or inside our planet. This led to research of the Hollow Earth and subterranean theories in the 1980s and 90s, which in turn led to the realization that the answers we seek are in the control of a number of elitist groups and secret societies that we call collectively the Controllers. Even a quick look at recent world events should convince anyone that the Controllers' plan is working very well. It is these things we explore in this radio show. Join us as we work towards unraveling the secrets.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Timothy Green Beckley, Mr. UFO, and we are on the air with another episode of Unraveling the Secrets. And tonight, we're going to ask the question, are there aliens living amongst us? It's a subject that certainly is titillating and fascinating to a lot of people. Supposedly, there are extraterrestrials or ultra-terrestrials living right here beside us. Because why is that possible, or how is that possible? Because they look very human. They are not scary monsters. They are not insectoids. They are not reptilians. They are normal-looking men and women, perhaps a little bit on the good-looking side. I kind of describe them as your typical soap opera star. And on the other side of the Hudson River, in Jersey City, we have that balanced girl, Carla Anderson. Carla,
hey,
good evening. How was your weekend?
You know, I had that big white come in that time. He was very good looking.
There you go. Well, these are now the big whites.
He's a man of taste. Man of taste coming to balance.
They are usually the big whites usually described as being rather tall. These would be average size extraterrestrials. In fact, we're going to talk this evening about a particular ET by the name of VALIANT Thor, who supposedly lived inside the Pentagon for 3 years with the permission of the USA government. He had no fingerprints. His uniform could not be torn or cut or burned, and he was willing to share information with the U.S. Government. And he lived here amongst us supposedly for 3 years. And Craig Campobasso is the producer of a film called Stranger to Pentagon, which is based on this particular incident.
We've heard of your arrival from many sources.
I thought something horrible was going to happen to you.
This proposal is quite extraordinary.
Capital City's president is considering signing an agreement with them for their technology. Earth is in grave danger.
And we also have Marc Brinkerhoff, who has been on our shows before here on the PSN radio network. And he, of course, has had ET contacts since he was very, very young. And he has the amazing ability to go out. He lives here in Manhattan, but he can go outside of his apartment or down to Central Park with his camera and point it into the sky and take some rather amazing pictures of weird things that cannot be explained.
Yeah, I don't think he's been on this show yet, though.
Well, yes, you're right. He's been on The Outer Edge, which was the program that I was co-hosting previously with Tim Schwartz and Michael Mott. But he's been on other programs with me. I've known him for quite a number of years, and even though his experiences are rather far-fetched and far out, he does have the evidence in the way of photographs. In fact, I just completed a book, which we published a couple of weeks ago, called The UFO Repeaters, The Camera Does Not Lie. It's about 14 individuals who have this unmistakable ability to have some sort of mental contact with these ultra-terrestrials, and they instruct them at specific times to go outside and aim their camera at the sky, and when they develop the photos, there are UFOs on them, and some of them are really humdingers of the objects. I mean, we're not just talking about lights in the sky and satellites and stuff like that. We're talking about strange things that just cannot be explained. I mean, they are oddball objects, and they are definitely UFOs. Some have a structure to them. Now, some of the photographs that Mark has taken, you can actually see inside the port of the craft, and there's one picture of what I call a shadow being. You can see a silhouette of someone or something standing there. So,
is there a way we could see the pictures, Tim?
Well, they are online, yes. If you go to Mark's website, or even go to Facebook, because I posted them this afternoon, and if you go to his website, you'll see a lot more.
Are they in the book, the UFO Repeaters?
Yes, they are. The UFO Repeaters, yes, they are in the book. A good many of them are, but Mark has actually taken so many that you couldn't put them all in there. But he's a remarkable young gentleman, and he has a very unique story to tell. And we're even going to find out about his higher self, which he says is actually on board of one of these craft that visit him on a regular basis here in Manhattan. Now, this is, the idea or the concept that they are among us is not really that new. I mean, I have been hearing stories for quite a number of years. I remember back, I think it was even in the late 60s or early 70s, I was giving a lecture up in Michigan somewhere, and after the program or my presentation was over, one of the individuals in the audience, who was a professor, actually approached me, and he said, "I want to tell you a story, but I don't want you to use my name, and I don't want to be involved with it personally." But supposedly he knew a woman, a very good character, who had been driving outside of town rather late at night, or at least after sunset. Now, she saw off to the side of the road a very bright light, which, as she got closer, she could see was a ship of some sort resting there on a landing gear. Now, she kind of pulled over to the side of the road to shut her headlights off, because obviously she didn't want to be observed. Because she didn't know she didn't know what this was about, who these people were, but she did know that it was pretty unusual that this craft would be there. It didn't look like anything. It wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't an airplane. There were no drones in those days. This did not something that appeared to be made on Earth. So from a safe distance, she watched as several individuals came out of the object and got into an earthly-made automobile. A black car usually is described, and she saw enough of their facial features. She said that if she ever saw them again, she would recognize them. Well, sure enough, she was in a supermarket. 2 or 3 days later, she was getting into the checkout line when she noticed, like, two individuals up in front of her, one of the men that she had seen get out of the craft and get into the automobile. She decided to follow him and to see, if she could engage him in conversation. Well, of course, it took her maybe a minute or two to get out of the checkout line after he had proceeded out the door. When she got out the door, there was no sign of this particular individual or any vehicle that he arrived in. And to this day, or the last time anybody spoke to her about this, she was convinced that this was someone not of this planet. And there are other stories that I've heard in this regard. Down in Highbridge, New Jersey, back in the 70s and 80s, there were people coming into the house, a farmhouse that was owned by Howard Menger at the time. Now, Howard claimed that since he was about 7 or 8 years old, he had these repeated experiences and took photographs outside of his place there in Highbridge, New Jersey. And these people were coming into the house, and they were not even bothering to disguise themselves. They looked so remarkably human that they easily passed as living amongst us here. And one of the stories that we're going to talk with Craig tonight deals with this specific case of Howard Menger and this individual known as Thor that has been seen numerous times living here amongst us. So I think at this point, perhaps we'll have a short break, and then we'll bring in the boys to talk about the alien amongst us. It's another fascinating night here on Unraveling the Secrets. With Tim Beckley, that would be me. With Carla Anderson over in Jersey City, that would be her. With Angel, the jackal down in Miami, very smug as he usually is because the weather is almost always nice in Miami, except when a hurricane comes through there. And with us tonight, we have the one and only Marc Brinkerhoff, that amazing man who has the ability to have telepathic contact, he says, with extraterrestrial beings and go out with his camera and point it in specific spots in the sky. And when the film is developed, or I guess it's digital today, I don't know what that process is called. But anyway, when the film is looked at, there are what you can only describe as unknown craft. We're not talking about just lights in the sky. We're talking about things with shape and structure. In fact, there's one photograph that I like, I think, of it's the best of all of them that Marc has taken, and he's taken probably well over 100. In fact, in our just published book, The UFO Repeaters, The Camera Doesn't Lie, we have quite a layout of some of the photographs that Marc has taken, including one that I call the shadow being, which seems to be a being of some type with his hands on his hip looking out the port. Very strange, very unusual, very unexplainable. And with us from Craig, are you in California?
I am.
You are. So you're in another warm spot on the globe. Are you in Los Angeles?
Yes, Los Angeles, and
you
it's
are,
like
okay.
summer today. Yeah.
Shut up.
I want to get the correct pronunciation of your last name. It's Campobasso?
No, Campobasso. So if you say it with an Italian flair, you'll never forget. You go Campobasso or Campobasso. But if you remember it with that, you'll remember.
Okay, but anyway, we're glad to have Craig aboard with us this evening. He is the producer of a film called Stranger at the Pentagon. And for you who have been living in a black hole in space somewhere, The Stranger at the Pentagon is a really unbelievable story, at least even to me. It's about a spaceman by the name of VALIANT Thor, who landed in a craft here outside of Washington, D.C., and was escorted and lived inside the Pentagon for 3 years. One of the individuals that spoke with him on a number of occasions is a gentleman who is now deceased by the name of Reverend Frank E. Stranges. Now, I think before we're going to have a round table discussion here this evening on aliens amongst us. Do they really live here on Earth alongside of us? But I think we should turn the microphone over to Craig to have him tell us a little bit about this gentleman by the name of VALIANT Thor, and when he arrived here, under what circumstances, and what makes him believe that this is an actual individual that lived here who was not of earthly origin, and why we can assume that it wasn't just a hoax of some sort.
When did this happen?
It was from March 16th, 1957 to March 16th, 1960. And that's when he arrived on, I believe it was a Saturday, in a agricultural field in Alexandria, Virginia at 8 a.m. in the morning. There were a couple of police officers first on the scene. Anyway, he was taken directly to the Pentagon. Actually, by the way, when these officers actually laid eyes on this man, all of their fears and everything washed away, and they actually walked up and had a conversation with him.
Was he in a craft?
He was in a craft, yes. So, and all the craft and all of that stuff can also be seen on the website, Stranger at the Pentagon. So if the listeners are want to sort of forage through the website as we're speaking, there's some blueprints and things as well to the craft. The craft are 300 feet in diameter. and they're double-deckered. The crew is 200, and I think it's 97 feet from top to bottom. So they're quite large. They're called Victor-class saucers. So that's how
So what
Dr.
did he
Frank
look like?
had explained them.
What did he look like? That he got escorted? Then what they do with the craft? I mean, was this all in plain sight? The craft and being escorted?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and he's a very handsome man. There's actual photographs that were taken of him much later at a Howard Menger UFO. He used to have his little UFO conventions in the backyard in High Bridge, New Jersey. So August Roberts, who was a ufologist who had one of the largest collections at the time of flying saucers and unidentified flying objects as well, was, like I said, a retired Air Force photographer. So he's the gentleman that took those photos. He believed at the time that he and the people that were with him were definitely not from here. He said because that there was this energy that was vibrating from them, but not only that, Valiant Thor had no handprints or fingerprints. When he was talking, he noticed that as well. And he just said when he looked at him, he could feel him look right through him like he knew his entire soul history. And he knew it. And it's interesting because Dr. Frank said the first time that he met Valiant Thor, that he knew that he knew everything about him and his entire soul history, which I found fascinating. So, but anyway, just the basis of the story is he came, he met with Eisenhower and Nixon, and
did he come alone?
Yes. Well,
okay.
He came alone, but the people, whoever was driving the craft, took off afterwards. So. But he came alone, and evidently Eisenhower and them felt a great goodwill coming from him, so they asked him to be a guest of the government for 3 years, and they sort of briefly discussed why he came, which was he had a proposal which was to help eliminate sickness, disease, poverty, and to prolong life, and they thought that 3 years would be a good time frame to discuss the proposal, see if they could implement it throughout the United States, and then, if proven successful, share it with the rest of the world. So
what happened to that plan?
Well, by the end of the 3 years, it was they actually turned it down for the reasons being that it would put doctors, nurses, pharmaceutical companies, everybody out of business, and that the economy would crash.
Scumbags.
What's that?
Scumbags. I'm just saying, though.
Scumbag.
Yes.
I didn't understand. I was like, what?
Oh yeah, we don't pull any punches.
Carla.
No, we don't pull any punches.
We don't pull any punches.
Like, can we live?
We love that. Yeah. So anyway, there, Ken, I read the story in the 80s. I found it fascinating. I saw the photographs of Valiant Thor, his vice commander, Dawn. There was a lady pictured, a gorgeous blonde lady who was referred to as Jill, who I later found out from Dr. Frank was the wife of another vice commander on board named Zan, Z-A-N-N. And I've never met these beings. Dr. Frank was in contact with them throughout the years. I sat with him when I was writing the feature-length script for many years, going over stories and all kinds of things of his experiences, and then I put it together, and then Dr. Frank passed away. So. And that was in November of 2008, and I just woke up one morning in 2013, and it was, I think, the fall of 2012. And what I do for a living, my primary job is casting film and television. And I was one of the casting directors on Sky Captain and The World of Tomorrow with Jude Law and Angelina Jolie and Gwyneth Paltrow. And that film was conceived by the writer-director who did a short film and then got it off to a producer. They raised the financing independently. A lot of people don't know that Sky Captain actually was an independently financed film that was then, in its incarnation when it was all done, sold off to Paramount. And Paramount distributed the film. So they were able to make the film of their own volition. So a lot of films are now done by making a short film so that you can sort of give your vision. Back in the day when George Lucas did Star Wars, Fox had no idea what he was talking about when he was describing the world, so he had to go and get really high-end airbrush artists to do these sort of giant paintings on boards. I worked on the original Dune with David Lynch as well for 4 years, and back then we didn't have CGI. What we had is Albert Whitlock, who was an incredible matte painter who used to paint these scenes on glass, which were then photographed and inserted into the film. So we had lots of airbrush artists on Dune. Well, one, I think his name was something Shelton, I believe. Wow, that's a memory. Whew, that's going back far. But anyway, long story short, he did these so that everybody would get an idea of what the landscapes were. So that's the same thing as what I did with the short film. And
do you believe in the short film?
Say it again?
Do you believe in the short film? Do you believe
in
the Stranger at the Pentagon? Yeah. Do you believe that?
I think everybody should make their own decision about it. I've had my my own experiences knowing Dr. Frank, and is this a story of science fiction or is it a story of science fact? I think it should be left up to the viewer to decide.
Now, let me interject something here, just for a moment. Now, I knew. I guess we should describe or talk a little bit about Frank Strange, as who he was.
Sure.
He was a minister. Now, it's quite unusual for a Christian. I don't know if you'd really call him a fundamentalist. I don't think in this case we could call him that. But he was a minister. He had his own congregation. But what made it so unusual is that he, on many occasions, got up on the pulpit and discussed his belief in flying saucers. Back when he was in seminary school, I think someone that he knew, or maybe somebody that he had gone to seminary school with, had UFO sightings. So he started studying all these cases and having an interest in the subject. And
right.
He was giving a lecture, I guess, one day, when this woman approached him and said, "Frank, can you obey orders?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am." Right? And yeah. She said, "Well, I want to take you to the Pentagon to meet someone who is living there, who is very unusual, but I think you should meet him," because Frank at that point was talking about UFOs on a regular basis. So he went with this woman to the Pentagon, and he managed somehow to get inside. She told him to follow her instructions precisely, and he did. He got inside the Pentagon. He met this individual, Valiant Thor, who had no fingerprints, whose uniform could not be set on fire or cut or anything else. And he remained in contact with him over the course of actually many years, because even after he left the Pentagon, I guess he would have conversations, go to Frank's house in Los Angeles and continue this communications. In fact, Frank claims that he actually even introduced Valiant Thor to Ted Kennedy before Ted Kennedy was
Bobby
assassinated.
Kennedy.
Mark, what do you think about all this?
What about all of this?
Mark?
Valiant Thor?
No, yeah, I mean, you said that you've been on spacecrafts, you've had contact. What do you think about all this?
That's a true story.
It is?
Yes.
Oh, just let me finish this one thing. It'll take
Thor,
just a
right.
couple of
Okay.
seconds here. All right. Okay, so here now I knew Dr. Frank fairly well. I don't have many friends that are in the ministry, but Frank was an unusual individual. He was very kind-hearted. He wasn't your typical preacher, to say the least. Anyway, somewhere along the line now, he hosted a lot of our UFO conferences that we had in San Diego and Palm Springs and so forth, and always did a remarkable job. He was a great platform speaker. Somewhere along the line, I think around probably the mid to latter 70s, I had a public relations company here in New York, and somehow I met Frank's brother. Now, he came from a family of ministers, but Frank's brother, I believe his name was Dave, we were talking after one of his sermons, right? It was kind of like a Pentecostal meeting where the people there talk in tongues and threw themselves on the ground and so forth. And, I asked his brother about Frank. I said, what do you think about, Valiant Thor and your brothers talking about UFOs and all? And you know what he told me? He said, my brother Frank would be much more successful if he gave up this UFO and Valiant Thor concept and just stuck to the regular Christian ministry. And I thought about that. He was exactly right, because Frank would have been very successful if he didn't talk about the spaceman inside the Pentagon, but he decided to do it because he knew it to be the truth. And if Frank knew it to be the truth, I give it a high level of credibility. Now, whether this individual really was from outer space or whether the government had done some sort of ploy for disinformation purposes, we'll never know. I mean, we can't say for sure that he didn't have fingerprints because we don't have an ink pad. We didn't do the testing. We didn't try to burn his clothes or anything else. But Valiant Thor has shown up on different occasions to different people. And as the night goes on, I'll reveal at least one more story about that. But go ahead, Mark. I didn't mean to take the microphone out of your hand. And yet you tell us you tell us about some of your experiences, because what we're talking about here is not just Valiant Thor, but the fact that there may be humanoids from other planets or extraterrestrials walking right amongst us. And the individuals that you claim to be in contact with from an early age are not, creatures, monsters, or hairy apoids or anything like that. They are human-looking extraterrestrials, pretty much, right?
Pretty much. Well, kind of, but they wouldn't fit in here. As you know, they're like 7, 8 feet, 9 feet tall.
Yeah.
Elongated eyes and all. Bronze-colored, golden skin. And
so they don't look like us.
Well, they just resemble people, but they're not. They wouldn't be able to walk.
They're humanoid, but not human-looking.
Right. They could look like a human kind of, but that's about it. You could tell them in a crowd. That's what I mean. No, there are people in New York that are not from here or from Earth, and my old friend Ingo Swan, he tells a story in his book Penetration where he actually saw a woman actually in California at a grocery stand, and described her as very tall, over 6 feet tall. So, and they're very telepathic. They can read minds and everything. And like Valiant Thor, they can see you and know all about you. They're like they're masters in essence. So the beings I met, first ones I met were I call my space family, because I don't come from Earth either. It's like a reincarnated thing. But they took me on board. I went willingly. I was never.
How old were you?
First time was 5 years old. And
where were you? Tell us how it all went down.
Upstate New York.
So tell us the whole story. How'd it go?
But
when you were 5, so what happened?
I snuck out of the house because I was telepathically being called to just come up to the field, because I would go up to the field when with my dog. The school field from my house was only, if you ran up the hill, 30 seconds to get there. It was not far. So I would sneak out, run up there, and run back. And this is in the times 1950, 57, 58, those days. No one's around up there. And I would come back. So when this happened, the first UFO I saw upstate at that field was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon over the football fields, and it came as a giant silver sphere. It looked like a shiny chrome pinball. It was probably, I estimate today, 30 feet diameter, because it was over the trees. It was huge. and had telepathic contact with the sphere, and I knew there were people in it, and they talked to me, and anyway, that's my first contact. Then after that came, I was called to go back to the field, and it was a warm night, and I went up to the field, and I actually started asking to go. I said, come here, take me home. So this big giant object looks like a super bright star, shows up, stops overhead, comes down, and as it comes down, it gets to about the size of a quarter in the sky at arm's length, then moves to my right and hovers over the field. It didn't land, and it was behind the schools, so you couldn't see anything from the road. And
how old were you then?
Out. 5 years old.
Okay.
But just about 5 years old.
So it happened a couple times when you were that age?
It happened again when I was about 7.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was in the woods near the school. There was a big giant rock you could go sit on and just meditate and just sit there. And there was a clear opening to the sky. And one time a being levitated there, talked to me. There was a lot of different little things that happened. And another time, I was around 12. They were coming back and forth when I turned 11 and 12. Coming back any time I asked, they would come back at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, come over my house, and anyone with me would see them. And if I visited some friends at night, like after school, they'd always ask. I didn't have a lot of friends, but the ones that asked me, they said, "Can you come over for dinner?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, all right, sure, I guess." And at 8 o'clock, I would hear I asked them to come where I am. They said, "We can always locate you," that kind of thing. So I would hear, "Come outside," and anybody with me, the kids or they'd come out and they'd see them stop over their house or stop over us in the driveway. And they'd go up and down for yes questions and back and forth for no questions for the kids. I would hear them telepathically say yes or whatever. And then they would take off and leave, and they go zooming away.
What did your parents think?
My parents, at first, my father always listened to me because I had information back then that I was from space. Mm-hmm. And I had no knowledge of that at 4 years old. And so he watched me. He was very metaphysical in a way. He had, subscribed to Fate magazine at one time, so he was open to this. Mm-hmm. He witnessed them with me. They came over our backyard, 2 of them. One opened a window, big giant window around the whole side of the ship, and there were 6 silhouettes that's waist up, and one on the left starts waving to us, and my father saw them at that moment. And then they turned, the ships went on with a little energy and glowed, and the window had stopped and closed up. And they shot one of them on the right side, shot a beam into the yard, and I knew that was it could have been a teleportation beam, but my first feeling when I saw it was a teloid beam that can hear and know what's going on in the whole area. It was like being a probe beam.
What year was this?
1967.
Okay.
February 10th. It was cold and snow was on the ground. And I said to them, "I'll meet you at the school," telepathically and out loud. I said to the backyard there, "I'll meet you at school." And they started hovering very slowly and going towards the school, and they hovered over the top of the school. And then my father drove me up with his car quickly to the field. He didn't stay in the field because he didn't have a jacket, but it was windy and cold. My dog came with me, and we went on into the field where I used to go. That's where they picked me up. And they came from over the school and hovered over me in the field, and my father was watching. And I got hit with a lot of warm energy from the craft. So we were staying, my dog and I were just sitting on the snow basically most of the night. My father went back to the house, and they did some show for me in the sky. When an airplane showed up, they would just shut off and disappear and pop back on later on. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of that thing. I was telepathically talking with them. And they didn't want to, they said, "We can't land because it causes too much commotion." And in that time, the 1960s.
So when did they take you up?
Hmm?
When did they take you up?
1958.
That's when they took you up in 58?
Yeah, I was 5 years old. We went behind the moon, went towards Saturn, and I know there's people in the moon, and they told me about the moon because I already knew about some of it because I told my father there's people in the moon, and then they took me to the moon to show it to me from behind the moon. Then we went off towards Saturn.
What was in the moon?
Well, the moon is, it's a spaceship. It's a giant spaceship. But the moon was set up there millions of years ago. It was brought in after a planet had exploded in the solar system and caused an imbalance in the system. So they brought this ancient, let's say, core of an old planet somewhere. Looks like a battered up thing. They have it inside. They carved it out. It's all cleaned out. It's metal inside. There's a ship inside there, basically. And it's
What, the moon?
Yeah.
There's a ship in the moon?
It's a ship.
That's no moon.
Like Mars, it's moons and no moons. Those are also hidden in the sky's crap.
It's like a
What
test
he's
stand.
what he's trying to say is that the moon is an artificial satellite.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in it out of body. And when I told Ingo Swan about that, he had been out there out of body. He said to me, no one's been there except, no one's seen what I've seen except you. I've ever met anybody on the whole planet. He says, you've seen what I've seen in the moon. I said, yeah, there's people in there. Scientific, very scientific.
What kind of people?
They always did say the man in the moon, right?
Yeah. There was a couple of kinds of ETs. The ones that look human, they could walk around here. And there's others that are a little humanoid looking, so they wouldn't walk on the Earth. But they have still kind of human-like features. They might have larger eyes or tall and skinnier or slender. And
like the Greys?
No, I didn't see any Greys, actually. I know there's probably some there probably today, but...
What color skin were they? What color were they?
They looked very white, the ones that I saw.
Okay.
And almost silver white. I can't, how do you explain that?
The ones that live in the moon.
Tone to me.
Question, did they have, like, say, their eyes, were they all black oval, or they have corneas like ours?
The ones that I saw looked human. The first ones I saw looked human, and they were tall, but they had very white skin. The other ones I saw that looked human, that could fit in, had different types of color skins, very dark tans, and a very beige look, more like tans. And then some other beings were more skinny, very kind of strange or alien-like looking, but they did not look like Greys. They had irises in their eyes. Yeah, they had irises.
Insectoids?
No. I've seen those out of body. Yeah, but the thing is that they're in there. They're there. And they told me they monitor, telepathically, they're monitoring everything in the solar system, and that's been there for millions of years. So
the moon.
Yeah. It just goes to show you, our systems are older than this solar system. There's more systems. And certain times.
So how long they've been monitoring this planet for millions of years then?
Well, when the moon was set up to be the moon, I would say back in beyond dinosaur times too, because there was an ancient. The Earth has flipped a couple of times, and this is the fourth time now we're on. We're like the fourth run. We went around 3 times. This Earth went around. So we'll find on Earth many old artifacts that date from millions of years ago. You have the giants and other kinds of artifacts. Remember the UPAs, the out-of-place objects like the battery in the geode. It takes a geode to form, right, millions of years ago. So it's not a Ray-Vac battery, but a battery of some kind.
Are you talking about the Baghdad battery, for example?
Yeah, remember they discovered the battery inside of a geode that was cut open?
Right. Yeah, the Baghdad battery.
But it wasn't like our modern battery. But it was a battery.
Right. But it had the same basic idea of what our modern batteries do. Yeah.
Yeah, could you just see the ET walking by on the beach of the shores or something, tossing it? But whoops, I lost it somewhere. But when I was in England, I was on there too on the ship. So we've had different experiences. And
now, Mark, how many contacts do you say that you've had? I mean, I guess you would have to estimate them. And how many actual photographs have you taken? Because I know some of them are in the UFO Repeaters book, but certainly not all of them. You have more on your website. How many different pictures have you taken, and how did that actually start? Were you told to go out with your camera and start taking photographs?
It started when I met Tim and Harold at one of Tim's seminars he had in New York City back in 1976. I think, I don't know, it was on the East 50s, I think, where you had the building there, right? There was a building, and you had like an auditorium with seats.
Well, let's see. I had a place on 14th Street. That was the main headquarters. But then we rented out different auditoriums if we were expecting a bigger crowd or something.
Okay, that was the one. I think Tim Wiley was there too.
Oh yeah, well we had just about everybody who was up and coming in the world of the paranormal and UFOs without exception. I think we were one of the first, if not the first, metaphysical centers in the certainly on the East Coast. On the West Coast, they had been doing this for a long, long time, but it never really caught on here in New York. But we gave it, we gave it a good shot for many, many years. But my mind, it's been a long time since I've known you, certainly. But refresh my memory. How did that come about that you went out with the camera?
Right after I went to that meeting where you had people with UFO experiences come, like Betty Hill, Stella Lansing, and two men who witnessed the Fatima UFO. Two men were there. I don't know their names, but I just remember they.
I don't remember either. No,
they were they were kids when it happened, and they were in that field, and the craft came down spinning with lights and everything, and dried the dirt and everything. So I found that really great, and then I think Tim Wiley was helping to run something at that building. Maybe that's how I also met him. And Tim talks about angels and dolphins, and
that's correct. I remember him from the harmonic convergence. We're in the Central Park, I think, burying some crystals or something, and he and I have on the brightest, colorful shirts of anybody among the crowd.
Harmonic.
Excuse me,
he used to
gentlemen.
live around 90th Street.
You know what, Tim?
Yeah.
I can't go on with any casual conversation after Mark just said that he's been with all these aliens. I'm still not like. How did this affect your life? Has it affected your life?
Oh, brother, has it?
I mean, did it make you nervous? Did it make you feel empowered? I mean, this happened since you were 5. You seem like you have
I felt like
good
a
understanding
spy that knew things and wasn't allowed to say anything because no one would ever understand. And I was given information and couldn't share it at all for 40 some odd years. And they told me to release it now, so I've been doing that since.
So what information?
Well, it's actually how to protocols and how to, besides telepathically link up to your higher self or oversouls and stuff, making that connection. And people have experienced it when I give these talks. We do this, and some people have actually called and emailed us and said, it worked. I experienced this, and within a week, because I don't say it's going to happen right then. It could, depending how psychic the person is or how in tune. But it's just something we my wife and I, we teach this at little lectures we do. But this other information was I saw futures. I saw different things happening and told my father about it when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And years would go by and the whole thing would come true. And he'd go to me, "You told me that when you were a little kid." And I would go, "Thanks, if something happened," because I wasn't sure what was going to happen anymore, But
Do you believe in God?
Do
you believe in God?
Oh, yes, a creator, yeah.
So where do you think this fits in? What do you think's going on? We're trying to unravel the secrets. What do you think is going on?
Okay, well, the space people that I know, and those there's another different commands around our solar system, and people have heard of Ashtar, the Ashtar command. These are actual people. I've met them. They are existing, and they are friends of ours, actually, for the whole galaxy and this universal spot in our galaxy, in our solar system. So they're trying to be the benevolent being they are, but they also bring with them love, extreme beauty and love. And what Valiant Thor was speaking about was exactly the same thing, bringing health, healing, wellness to the physical dimensional space of Earth, these 3D realities. On those realities, they come from the etheric and higher. There's no sickness, there's no pain like that. And part of the message from the crew and the space beings was to, not just at Valiant, but others, they had come to our governments and asked to join with them, because then we could have transportation in space as well. But it seems that Earth, just wants to have the power, the weapons. They don't trust each other, I guess. And like the beings that I know have always said, the people of Earth have to see the planet, like the astronauts when they're in space. The planet is one. It's like a family. It's like a house. All the people on the planet are a family. Stop just warring and stop seeing each other in different countries and continents. Stop seeing races. These are all tests, things people go through. And the physical bodies are like our automobiles we're traveling in. The soul's within them. No one sees the soul totally, but when you're out, way out in those high-frequency dimensional spaces, even your soul traveling out of body and all, you can see your true self, the way you actually look. The Earth is just for now. The mirror you're looking, that's just now. But
What do you think about stories about abductions, though, like horrible abductions and things that have happened, frightening things?
I've had
like Travis
they sound like really nice aliens.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I've had friends who had the horrible, scary ones with the babies missing and everything, and they usually were very frightened.
Same aliens, though?
No, those are not my friends. Those are the, let's say, scientific kind. They're physical. And Earth, well, you know, out west, they let the beings have a place underground to have a place because their planet was dying. And the space beings I know told me all these different things about them way before. And when I heard about Betty Hill when I was a kid, and I said to my father, someday I'm going to meet her. I was like 7, 8 years old. And she was, I'm going to have to guess now. Maybe I was 7, 8 years old in 1961. So my father says, how could you meet her? You don't even know where she is. I said, someday I'm going to meet her. Sure enough, 1976, I meet Betty Hill and stayed up there with her for a week. And then came back and Stella Lansing.
And what did you discuss with her?
I actually asked her, is she still upset about those ETs, the little ones that took her? And she said, at first I was very upset and angry and frightened. And as I went through years go by, she said, I noticed, wait a minute, they didn't hurt me as bad as some doctors have. And she started to
that's for sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure. Now, you know, actually, though, just before she passed away, a couple of years before she passed away, she would go out actually on a regular basis. She had a favorite site where she would go with her camera and sit there and wait for them to return. And she did get some photographs of some unusual. Most people don't realize that there actually was a history of UFO-related experiences in her family. Going back, I think it was her grandparents. It was actually a landing on a farm or some place that they had. I don't think Betty was even born at that time. But she did become interested, in making some sort of communication with them. And of course, a lot of people thought that, she's just getting elderly and she's imagining this and so forth and so on. But I do believe that, she was very sincere about this. And of course, Stella Lansing, I kind of helped to discover her, if there's such a thing in the UFO field. She was one remarkable lady. Now, you talk about going out with the camera. In fact, if you go to my YouTube site, Tim Beckley or Mr. UFO's Secret Files, there is a broadcast, a TV broadcast from one of the shows back in the 70s that runs about 6 or 7 minutes about Stella Lansing and all the amazing things that she took with her 8 and 60 millimeter movie cameras. Now, today, of course, we've got Photoshop and other forms of animation where you can more easily hoax a UFO photo. But these were not even UFO photos. These were things in the sky that shouldn't be there. She got faces. She got clocks. She got airplanes that were flying upside down. You name it, Stella Lansing, was photographed it. But, I want to get back to Craig for a minute because, Craig, you did have some experiences, maybe not with Valiant Thor, but you did have experiences with masters and beings from somewhere else. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I did. I had a spiritual awakening when I was 26 years old, and it was on the inner with master teachers who actually came and woke up my cells, which is sort of like waking up your, what Mark was talking about, your higher self or your over self. And that awakening lasted for almost a year, and the first 8 months were probably the most beautiful thing that I ever experienced, because I was suddenly asleep and then all of a sudden I was awake, and I was awake in what creation was, and every little thing, every living thing I looked at, I saw the beauty behind the creation of it. And I started seeing into other people's souls, and me, who was seeing actors on a daily basis, somebody would walk in and I would see and feel this incredible beauty coming from them that I literally would sob and sob and sob, but they were beautiful sobs. And then I started connecting to the Earth's heart and soul, and never realizing that this was a great mother who was taking care of all of us, and that we needed to also take care of her. So there were all of those experiences that went on, and then that's sort of what catapulted the writing and all of that, and that's where my trilogy, The Autobiography of an Extraterrestrial Saga, stems from, was from a lot of those awakenings and stuff. So that website's autobiography of on ANET.com if people want to look at it. So book 1 and 2 are out. I'm writing book 3 now, but I did have one experience that I would love to share. I'll keep it brief. When Dr. Frank was alive, I had gone to a restaurant. I ate some fish that didn't agree with me, and I literally was bedridden for 3 days. On the third day, I had to call a friend to come pick me up. She rushed me to the doctor. They just kept giving me things for my stomach, and when that proved unsuccessful, they threw me in an ambulance and rushed me to the hospital. They took x-rays, and they discovered that I had a bowel obstruction. They were going to keep me overnight and then operate first thing in the morning. One of the vice commanders who is on Victor 1, her name is Teal, and anyway, she's very gregarious and very, very smart. She's one of the smartest people on the crew, Dr. Frank said.
On the alien crew? On the alien crew?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But they look human, and she is what you would say would have a voluptuous body, and she has red hair, green eyes, and sort of porcelain white skin. And anyway, long story short, I was laying there in the middle of the night. I sort of woke up in between twilight, when you're in that twilight stage, and I just felt her around me, and all of a sudden I started to feel bubbles going through my intestines. And it was the strangest feeling, and I knew when I woke up I was going to be fine. And interestingly enough, when I woke up in the morning, I was on my side, and I looked right there, sitting in the chair, was Dr. Frank. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Teal called me this morning and told me she fixed you up last night, so I'm here to tell you that." So I had x-rays done immediately when the doctor came again to I didn't tell him the experience, of course, and everything was fine, and I was released from the hospital that day. So that was sort of my experience with it.
How did you have the spiritual awakening in the first place? I mean, were you in some kind of deep meditation? Were you abducted up in a beam? Did they come down to you?
No, it started where I would just wake up inside of another realm, is what I called sort of like lucid.
How old were you?
26 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, I had just finished working for a season and a half on Spielberg's Amazing Stories. Remember that TV show from long ago? And it began right after that. And it just started where I would just be in this other realm that I would wake up in, and I saw these three beings.
Were you expecting
there.
any of this? I mean, what did you think you were in a dream?
Nope. Didn't expect any of it, but it didn't feel unfamiliar either. There was no fear, there was nothing attached, it was complete and utter unconditional love.
Do you believe in God?
Yes, of course I believe in God. But I believe in God that everything is God. That all of creation is God. We're all God, and we're all part of it. It's interesting, when children come into the world, they're still coming from that other realm. And my niece, when she was quite young, she was I think about 7 years old, between 5 and 7. I was like holding her, and she looked at me and she said, Uncle Craig, what's really beautiful? I'm God, you're God, and we're all God. And my sister looked at me and said, don't look at me. I didn't tell her that. And I just, I found that really, really fascinating. And I do believe that we are all one and the same, and so do I believe all of the advanced beings and everything as well.
So do you agree with Mark?
Well, I agree with a lot of the stuff.
Experience?
Yeah. I don't share that experience. No, I've never met any in the physical or have been taken. I've been sometimes I will, like when I was especially doing a lot of work with Dr. Frank, I would remember being in different parts of the craft and looking and studying the different parts that I would be writing about. So that was my experience with that. But no, I would love a physical experience. I think what he's experienced is incredible, and it's really quite humbling, isn't it, Mark?
Oh my God!
Yes.
They call us, all of us. We're all brothers and sisters, and more in the light, and they see us as their younger brothers and sisters who are just a few rungs on the ladder over here, and they're a couple up. So they're reaching down their hand to pull us up to the next few rungs, and that's what they want to help, And they exactly the same. What we believe is aspects of Creator. We're all aspects of the Creator, like a multifaceted diamond, and we all have an individual personality or reality like that, and yet we are all part of it all. So it's like Creator's experiencing everything for everybody and everything.
Yes.
And so when I see a flower, I talk to it. If I see a tree, I'll pet it. In the nature kingdom, nature spirits, I've photographed them. I've seen them. And they're there, and they're just on the next frequency. So when people get tuned in, and all, they start have more intuitive ability and purify their body, cleanse their bodies more, eat more purified food, think higher thoughts, be loving to everyone.
Right.
Don't think negative. Don't drink lots of booze. Everything like that just creates an energy around the body that is able to
Mark,
past the higher frequency.
Mark, you had told me earlier today about an experience with an individual that appeared materialized at the foot of your bed, and you have every reason to believe that this might be Valiant Thor?
I've always remembered the person who helped me, and I told Tim today that this had happened probably when I was I'll say 8 years old or so. I was riding my bike, and my cousin was with me behind me, going down a dirt road that we knew, very, just sandy type of dirt road, and my neighbor's dogs would play with us and chase us. So 3 of the dogs were playing with me. They always loved us, and they're just running alongside the bike. And I looked down to the dog, and I said, "Now, Mandy, don't get too close." And she was just running along, and all of a sudden, I'm on the spaceship, which is like you go out of body or soul travel, and I was on the ship, and I was having a nice time. And next thing I find out, I'm on my parents' bed when my mom put a cool cloth on my head, my forehead, and my father is there, my mother, and my cousin. She's off to the far left of the bed. I don't hardly see her. And at the end of the bed is a man in a suit, a young guy, dark hair, very good looking, and very clean looking. Really clean. He just didn't look like a guy you'd see. And I'm looking at this guy, and I said, "What happened?" I can't say where I was because I wouldn't have told my mother that. But I said, "What happened?" And she says, "Oh, this man brought you home." And I was like, "What happened?" And I remembered I was riding the bike. That's all I remembered, looking down at the dog. And they told me that, well, he went down on the ground with the bike. My cousin said he went slowly down onto the ground, and she thought I was fooling around. She came over to me, and the dog was kissing my face, and I was just smiling. And she kept shaking me, and I wouldn't wake up. And then he pulls up suddenly in a car and stops, gets out, and he says, "Let me help." And he had to follow my cousin to my mother's house, my parents' house, which wasn't far. And another neighbor who showed up from nowhere took my bike and brought it home. So that's how I found out that I got brought upstairs. And he stayed until I woke up. But he did say, "You're going to be okay now." So that was the end of that. He leaves, and I'm laying there going, that was a space person. I knew it in my head. I knew he was from space. Until I saw the pictures of Valiant Thor in the book of Frank Strange's years and years ago, many years ago. I think when Tim gave me the book, actually. I recognized that guy, and I said, "My God, that's the guy. It looks like that guy at the end of my bed, in my mom's bed. It just looked like him." But when I asked him, the name that he gave was Val. And at the time, I had a golden retriever named Prince Valiant. And I thought, I wonder if his name was Valiant, like my dog. So isn't that weird? That's the weirdest thing that's ever... That was weird. But I always knew the guy at the end of the bed was not from Earth, just by his face, the way he looked at me, and the telepathy I felt from him. And he was telling me, "You're going to be okay. You're okay." And I was. There was nothing wrong. I said to him, actually, I thought this. I said, I was out there on my friend on the spaceship. That's why I was probably smiling when my cousin said, "You were smiling." I couldn't wake up. I thought you were making a joke of this. But I was actually totally unconscious, like you're really out deep on soul travel. So that happened way back then. And because I've already had UFO experiences with the crew, different guys and different beings there, I just felt and knew this was not a human. I thought, sure, you guys would rescue me at the right time somehow. I didn't even know what happened.
Well, after we come back from our short break here, I'm going to relate another incident involving Val Thor, where someone else apparently had contact with him without realizing it for a number of years until they saw that photograph in Stranger at the Pentagon. Before we go on our break, why don't you fellows give us, the listeners out there, your website so that they can go to it while we're on the break, write it down. Mark, go ahead.
Okay. Intergalacticmission.com. And info@intergalacticmission.com is the email.
And there's some really fascinating photographs there. I mean, these things are, pardon the expression, from out of this world. And Craig, how about where can our listeners see a trailer of Stranger at the Pentagon?
Sure, they can actually watch the short film there as well. It's strangeratthepentagon.com. And the Autobiography of an Extraterrestrial trilogy is Autobiography of ET.com, and then my regular website is craigcampobasso.com.
Now, Craig, how long does this version of the movie last? How long is it?
The actual movie is about 17 minutes. And then, we have our main title credits, and then we have our end title credits. And it was a film that was made by the people, for the people, because the people wanted to see it. So I wanted to put everybody's name who had something to do with it, because all of these people created it. So in real length, it's 24 minutes, but the actual film and a brief excerpt from Dr. Frank is about 17.
Now, do you plan at some future date to continue with this and make it into a full-length feature?
Yes, I'm actually raising, we have right now a $23 million budget to do the feature film. Yes, so I'm in the midst of raising that. So any listeners out there, if you got a big, nice checkbook, call me.
Well, I used to know in the...
Me too.
I remember.
Call me too.
I remember.
Me three.
I remember.
Call me three.
I remember in the old days they used to say sometimes it's easier to get big sums of money than it is to ask for $50,000 because your payback isn't going to be anywhere near as big.
That's right. That's
okay,
right.
so while we contemplate these numbers, We're going to go on a short break, and we'll be back in a few minutes with our fascinating conversation with some fascinating guests and some really fabulous hosts. All right, we're back in the mix. We're back in the swirl of things. We're as deep into this black hole as we're possibly ever going to get. And we're here with our amazing co-host, Carla Anderson.
Hello.
And,
Hello, we're unraveling the secrets.
And down there in
Wow.
down there in
right?
Miami.
Wow.
Well, we've been promising to unravel the secrets for weeks. And
We're
every
working on
week we
it.
give it.
Wow.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. Yes, we only got 100 more shows to go. And down in Miami, we've got the Jackal on the doing the engineering and producing this evening. And we have here in New York, we have our friend Mark, and out on the West Coast, we have Craig, who is the producer of Stranger at the Pentagon, at least the movie version of it. And I want to tell a Thor story. Of course, I knew Howard Menger fairly well. We were fairly, tight as much as a UFO researcher and a contactee can be. In fact, on several occasions, he graciously consented to appear at our UFO conferences on the West Coast. Now, he hadn't spoken in years. He wrote this book, From Outer Space to You, in which he talked about his experiences there in High Bridge, New Jersey, where these beings were landing in his apple orchard. And, there were some independent witnesses to this. It wasn't just his experiences. There were people that even told me that they had gone there without telling Howard that, they were going to plan a visit. They would park in the back of his house, back in the apple orchard or back in that vicinity. And late at night, they would see strange objects in the sky that would come down and land. And on one occasion, a gentleman who was an engineer told me that he had missing time. He remembers pulling in, listening to the Long John Nebel show. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And the next thing he knew, the sun was coming up. And he could never explain what happened to him during that period of maybe 4 hours where he had missing time is the best way to describe it, except his whole life changed, or something triggered him to go out, buy a trailer, sell his home, break up with his wife, and he started, tinkering is the best way I could describe it, and working on different inventions and all. It was like something had put information into his mind, and he was trying to relate that experience and work on whatever it was that they were trying to tell him. Kind of like the fellow Dreyfus in the film Close Encounters. Remember where he was building the Devil's Tower and all?
Yeah.
We've heard other stories like that where people have been implanted with thought and have gone out and tried to invent something or come up with some a device that they were told would be of benefit to all of humanity. Which brings me to this story regarding a gentleman by the name of Joseph Ferrier. Now, one of my friends is a talk show host by the name of Paul Eno. He has a program on a small Rhode Island radio station called Behind the Paranormal. In fact, he was on the show, I think 3 weeks ago now, talking about Charles Fort and some of the early experiences of people here in America with the occult and the supernatural, going back to the 1700s, poltergeists and hauntings and other vampires. In fact, most people don't realize that, according to Paul, there were vampires living in New England. And he wrote up some of these experiences for one of our books that just came out called The Bell Witch Project. Anyway, at the same radio station, which is WOON in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, there was a gentleman that I knew there from 50 years ago. His name was Joseph Ferrier, and he had a talk show there. But he also was interested in UFOs, but he really didn't discuss that on the air. That really wasn't one of his main subjects. But as a teenager, we exchanged publications. I had a newsletter called the Interplanetary News Service Report, and he put out the controversial phenomena bulletin. And we swapped publications in the mail, and we corresponded with each other, and we conversed on the phone. At some point, he invited me up to his to do his talk show, and again, it was not a UFO talk show. It was just more or less a what would you call it? It was a drive time show, like in the early evening while people are coming home from work. That's kind of usually the best time for a radio station to sell ads and all. That's their biggest audience. And it was usually local news, a lot of civic things going on in the neighborhood, in Woonsocket, in Cumberland, and so forth. Anyway, he was receiving a number of phone calls from listeners who said that they were seeing these mysterious cigar-shaped objects in the sky in a wooded area just outside the town of Cumberland. So he went there, and he was directed mentally to take photographs of this object in the sky. Now, there's a cigar-shaped object, and there are the dish-shaped craft with some sort of ball-shaped landing gear underneath, kind of look like the George Adamski craft. But Joe had experiences going back to when he was 4 or 5 years old, which he remembers seeing a giant rocket in the sky, which he said resembled something right out of a Flash Gordon movie. He remembers playing in a sand box and seeing this thing, come overhead. And throughout his childhood, he had a number of these weird UFO experiences, but didn't really think that much, about it. Unlike Mark, he didn't feel that he was, programmed to do something, to carry out the word, or that he was chosen to do, to be a representative of the space people. It was just something that he had seen and he had noted, and he thought was very unusual. And it got him, I guess, to thinking, and he put out this newsletter because he became fascinated with the subject. Anyway, when he was a teenager, he's about 17 years old, he was hitchhiking, which was something he normally didn't do, but he had to get somewhere, and he had no transportation, so he hit the open road, and somebody stopped and picked him up. And he said it was a very clean-cut couple, a man and a woman, very attractive. And they asked him where he was going, and Joe said, well, he was going maybe about 25 or 30 miles from where they picked him up. And they said, well, they could take him pretty close to his destination. They told him he could sit in the back seat of the car. Okay, so he got in the back seat of the car, and he noticed on the back seat, on the floor, and on the seat next to him were a series of small black boxes. And they were making a little humming sound, or, he could tell that they were activated. That's the best way I could describe it. And so his curiosity got the better of him, and he asked the couple in the front, the front seat of the car, what are these strange boxes back here? And they said, oh, whatever you do, don't touch them. We're going around the country, and we're leaving them with certain people because they're helping regulate the vibrations of the planet to bring up the vibration, something to that effect. It's not the exact words, but that's the the impression that he gave about this. Okay, so they left him off at his at the destination where he near where he was going, and he didn't think really too much about it. He said, "Well, that's a strange experience." The couple were very nice. The woman was very attractive, and they had these series of boxes in the back of the car that he couldn't explain. Well, now of course the first thing you would do would be to call security or something, and they would think it was naturally he was a terrorist instead of a space people, right? But many years ago, later he met August C. Roberts. Now, Augie Roberts had a huge collection of UFO photographs, and Augie took the pictures out at Howard Menger's place of this couple and this gentleman who Frank Stranger said was Val Thor. So Joe Ferrier is thumbing through the book, The Stranger at the Pentagon, that he had been, Augie Roberts had given him just to check out the pictures, the many pictures of flying saucers and all that was in there, because basically it was a picture book. And he came to the photograph of this couple at Howard Menger's property, attending a UFO conference, and he said to Augie Roberts, he said, this is the couple, definitely, no doubt about it, this is the couple that picked me up and took me to my destination and had the black boxes in the back seat of the car. So this is another, I guess, a story relating to Val Thor, putting it more in the, in the area of believability. I mean, if there's smoke, there's fire. and in that fire seems to be a valiant Thor.
Right, and I'm just trying to see if I can find it here, but also Harley Bird, who was the part of Project Blue Book back when, who was transferred from the Navy into Project Blue Book, also confirmed the story. Here's just like a little brief excerpt.
Well, you know something? I hate to say this, but I wouldn't believe one word that Harley Bird said, because we checked him out. He claimed he was related to Admiral Byrd. No truth whatsoever in that, and his story kept changing. I'm sorry, yeah. Yep.
Well, you could say what you want, but there are documents to prove that he worked for Project Blue Book, so that's not what's in contention here. So I don't know if he's related to Admiral Byrd or not, but anyway, so there was that, and then do you know Major George Filer? He's on your side over there.
Yes.
Yeah, and George went to work at the Pentagon, I believe, in 1961, and he told me that he had heard the inklings of the extraterrestrial man who had previously been there for 3 years. So I've been meeting people out of the woodwork who have seen him over the years as well. So the more and more this comes out, it seems that there's a lot of people have had some sort of contact. So.
Well, now, wasn't he supposed to have a ship that was parked in an underground or undersea base somewhere up? Was it in Nevada?
No, the craft is stationed at Lake Mead. There's
Lake Mead, yeah.
Yeah, there's several there. It's not underwater though, but there are, from what Dr. Frank said, and all these locations are listed in Stranger at the Pentagon as well. I think there's about 287 locations where all the Victor-class saucers are, and then the Starship is 14 miles long and 7 miles wide, and that's what sends out the beams that the craft actually follow and can do all the amazing maneuvers and things like that. I'm not really quite sure how it works, but Dr. Franks had mentioned that as well, so I thought that was fascinating.
Well, I know Frank said that he actually was on board the ship a couple of times.
Yes, yeah, and he told me on board the Starship as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's I believe the part obviously about the stranger at the Pentagon, because actually Frank did show me some documents that had been declassified where it's mentioned about this person living there. Of course, some people will say, well, it was a bit of disinformation that the government. I mean, some people have tried to say, well, it was a project to see what people would think about the possibility that there were ETs living amongst us. But it's certainly a credible story. It ranks up there high among the more believable cases as far as the contact experiences go.
Yeah.
And like I say, I knew Frank fairly well, and I think he was a very credible person.
Yes, yeah, and an incredible human being. A lot of people don't know he was also a marshal. He was a chaplain. He did a lot of work with police,
immigration,
organization, immigration. I traveled with him, so I. When we checked in, he showed his marshal badge, and I mean, that's a great thing about traveling. If you're traveling with a marshal, they give you they take you on board immediately. I'm traveling with you all the time, Dr. Frank. So, but another fascinating thing as well, because you had mentioned about that it could have been a ploy for them to see what the people might have thought about it. But back when the day the Earth stood still was made, George Filer told me he had met Michael Rennie on an airplane, and Michael Rennie had told him that the U.S. government funded that film. Now, I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but to actually see what the reaction to the public would be about that film. And then that came out in either 52 or 53. And then we have Valiant Thor coming into the scene in 57 to 60. And then he returned a year later and has been here ever since.
Well, it's rather interesting. A lot of people claim that, especially the early sci-fi movies, were an attempt by the government to program us. I don't know, in some way, to believe in the existence of the ETs. And of course, now, The Day the Earth Stood Still, which of course is one of my favorite. In fact, Robert Weiss, who produced and directed the film, he actually came to one of our conferences and gave a talk about the making of the movie.
Oh, wow.
Very good. Now he didn't seem to believe that there was any government conspiracy or involvement with it. That was in his pitch. But it's rather interesting about how the fact that that's one of the few science fiction movies outside of maybe Close Encounters where there was a positive spin on the visitors coming here, because most of the movies that have been made, have been showing the aliens as Martians that'll blow you out of the sky, or insects that'll take your grandmother away, or something along that along that line. And there have been, of course, there seems to be here in the UFO field, and I've studied this for many decades. There is a positive and negative, experiences. Some people are drawn to this, like Mark, and believe that the UFO beings are here to help humanity, and other people claim that UFOs are here to suck out our innards and take us out to lunch, not in a positive way. Right. And there are cases that support both contentions. Now, Mark, you say that you've never met an alien that you didn't like?
I never met a negative evil thing or evil alien or anything, but I feel that because the crew I work with, or my family, I call them, have always said, never think about these types. Because when I asked about Betty Hill, I was 11, 12 years old, and I said, do you know them? They said, we know of them, but do not call them toward you, because they're like scientific some of them are tricksters in a way too. So I tell people, do not think about them. Don't be afraid. Don't send fear out, because the energy comes back the same way. Like they read that in the energy fields. But the government, the ETs that I know, told me the story in the 80s, how the governments made bad choice with the crew that they got, the ones that are out there under the ground, the Evans, I guess. So, they came with their plan and was messed up, so they came here and tried to do that. But the positive ETs, let's say benevolent ones of the solar system, warned the government ahead of time and said, don't make a contract with them. They're known to trick. They will do anything. They'll sign anything, but they won't follow through. And again,
kind of like the Iranians.
And then, so they didn't follow through, and what happened is people were getting abducted, and then all that stuff went on. But there's so much to that. There are negative beings, yes, but the majority of the universal energy, or let's say omniverse, because there's many universal energy, are benevolent. And majority of living beings of sort, light beings and all, there's 70% that's light and energy dimensional beings. The 30% are physical densities. That's what I've learned from the crew. So they said the 3D reality is a testing grounds. The soul tests itself. It's like, we call it cosmic boot camp on Earth as a joke, but it's true. Right. Like, you go through everything here. And that's why they've always told me, I've never taken drugs or anything. They always told me as a child, they said, these are all tests that were put here. So keep as clean as you can. The body is your temple, it's a vessel. It's like, not feeding your car oil. So make it good oil, things like that. So I try to tell people to help that, do their bodies good, purify, detox.
No wonder I haven't had any space contacts lately.
Well, you can still have it out of body, and I feel that Craig had a real strong. You said lucid dream. That's when you're out of body, when you're right there. You probably went to one of the ships. They have ships around the Earth. They call them teaching ships, and they're on the 4th, 5th densities and 6th to 7th. So people can go out of body or be taken there by their guardians. And
well, let's ask Carla. Are you ready for a contact experience, Carla?
Oh, I don't know.
Carla.
A benevolent one. A benevolent one. But I was
Too
just,
many.
I was just thinking. I mean, could you reach this consciousness with meditation or something?
Sure.
Is it something that's within, or acid? Is it something that's within you?
Yeah, it's within everybody, of course. Yeah.
Well, the shamans, of course, they take ayahuasca and they see UFOs and they see space beings and they look remarkably similar to the ones that you guys describe. In fact, Dr. John Mack traveled, I think, to the Amazon and conversed with the shamans about this. And they had all kinds of paintings of things that could be UFOs and aliens. And so there is some belief among certain people that the shamanistic approach will also take you to a higher consciousness. Not that I follow that one myself either, but, I'm just saying that there seems to be many different ways to the top of the mountain.
Yeah, those are primitive ways, too, from ancient times. So people, please be careful. It's still a strong type of a medicine, let's say, that goes into the organ.
I think it's kind of hard to get ayahuasca in New York, but if you go over to Jersey City, maybe. I don't know.
No problem's getting it at the local high school here.
We can get you anything over here, yeah.
Go to your local high school, you'll find it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
There's one right around the corner. Sure.
You know why? Because if you trigger a kundalini or an energy experience that was not ready yet for that physical form, it can take a dangerous routes. It can make chakras open up prematurely, or a kundalini occur suddenly or spontaneously, which can actually launch a person in the air, which has happened to people I've known. And so you got to be careful with the body. A lot of times it happens naturally, but the way it happens naturally is to focus, meditate if you need on the third eye area and the crown chakra area with gentle energy and light. And you will gently and gradually raise up the energy frequencies of your chakras and the spiritual bodies. Taking drugs of any kind is dangerous, and it brings in openings for the lower astrals to come around. So I always try to warn people about that.
Well, now in a couple of weeks, I don't want to stick a poker in the fire, but in a couple of weeks we will have on Adam Go-Rightly, who has written about some of these shamanistic techniques. And he has some interesting stories to tell and is researching a book on the contactees, believe it or not. In fact, he asked me all about you, Mark, and I said, well, after you get off your next ayahuasca trip, maybe you'll give him a call.
I actually met Adam with Dr. Frank out at the Integratron, I think back in like 2005 or 2007. Yes. Yeah, tell him I said hi.
I will indeed. Well, also, too, I didn't actually get to meet him, but I went to a screening of Travis Walton's new movie, which I believe is called Travis. It's actually not a movie. It's a documentary about his, initial experience. It's interesting for people who are not up to speed on what originally happened to him. And it's got a lot of good footage from that period and interviews with, of course, the other 5 witnesses who have seldom been interviewed. And it's interesting to hear them talk about how the sheriff threatened to throw them in the pokey, throw away the key, and charge them with murder because Travis disappeared for like 5 days before he showed up, and nobody knew where he was. And it is certainly one of the more credible abduction experiences. And, you talk about like negative experiences. Now, for many years, Travis thought, well, these were not the kindest souls in the universe. I mean, they kind of poked and they probed. And in the movie, I think they even take his eye out, which is not according to what really happened. They had kind of a problem.
They didn't do that in the book. He doesn't talk about them doing that.
No. Well, you know what happened in the movie version? I think they told him at some point, "Hey, you got to change some of this because there's another movie."
Got to spice it up for Hollywood.
Yeah, but also too, there had been another movie that had just come out or was in the works, and it was too similar. So they said, "Yeah, we got to make some little changes here." And of course, Tracy Torme, who was the scriptwriter and one of the producers on it, didn't like that idea at all, and Travis didn't, feel too comfortable with it. But hey, they got a movie, and that opened up the case to millions and millions of people who would have never heard of it, previously,
Right.
And who probably have followed. I certainly know most people that when I told them today that I was going to, this Travis Walton meeting, they knew who he was. I mean, even people that don't know too
Was
much.
Travis there, by the way?
Yes, he was. He was there, but I didn't get a chance to say hello to him. I only stayed about a half an hour. It was held in a yoga studio, and I was kind of cramped in the back. And I am claustrophobic, to say the least. But I got to say hello to Peter Robbins, who is one of the producers of the film, and I guess they're on out on a short tour. Showing the movie, and I wish him well with it, and it is very well made, and I'm sure it'll be on demand shortly.
And what is the movie, Tim?
True.
What is it?
It's called Travis. Yeah.
And it won the film festival over at the UFO Congress. I was there.
Oh, yes.
I was there, and by the way, I just saw Yvonne Smith at Ciro had Travis, Tracy Torme, and Debbie, who is the lady who the book Intruders was done after. So actually Tracy did put that to rest, what everybody had been wondering about the ending of the movie. He had originally made Intruders first, and weirdly enough, it was repeating on television. A Paramount exec saw it and said, "Oh my God, this is too much like your film. You have to change the ending." And they were at this quagmire of, do they make the movie or do they not make the movie, because they weren't going to make the movie unless he changed it. So they tried to do it with symbology, and Travis explained that with certain things. But in the long run, you're right, Tim. It got out, and people got to learn from it as well. But in the end, Travis believes that whatever the energy of the ship hurt him, and in the end, what they did is they had to bring him on board and revive him. And
that's
make
his
him
latest.
well again.
Yeah, he discussed that with me back in 2009, actually, when I had him on the show for the first time. And we were talking about that. We mentioned that what if the beam actually killed him and they revived him, and he agreed that could very possibly have been, and he's been talking about that more recently now also.
Right.
It's very possible that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and anyway, but it was just fascinating, and I always wondered about that ending, but Tracy was there to do that. Of course, they weren't happy about it, but if you've got a studio giving you the money to make a movie like that, that's why I'm going the independent route on The Stranger at the Pentagon, so we don't run into them making Valiant, Thor, Captain Universe. So,
That's very true.
Well, just one last quick thing, Craig. Any other movies that you know that are being made out there, UFO-wise?
On the subject matter, they are making. Well, they're making Independence Day 2. They're going to start shooting that in the summertime. I know Will Smith is back, and
no Will Smith.
Fox.
He's not coming back.
Oh, he's not in it?
No, Jeff Goldblum is coming back. A lot of the cast members are, but he's not. They just hired another actor to play the grown-up version of the little kid from the first movie. So they're going to have that character back, but not Will Smith. He's not coming back. He's actually doing Suicide Squad with Warner Brothers instead of
that. But of that nature, that's the only one that I know of at the moment. Besides, us trying to get the feature length for Stranger going. So,
and I guess on the paranormal side, we would have Ghostbusters 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 rolled up together. With all women.
Actually, a new Ghostbusters is right up my alley. I think it's
but with Melissa McCarthy as the lead Ghostbusters, a bunch of Ghostbuster girls. I don't know. Tim, we have to get going.
We got gentlemen, lady, we have to close up because the other Tim is taking over. Tim Schwartz and Michael Mott will be on here in a few minutes, and so we got to call it an evening. But we'll be back next week at the same time. The regular time. And we want to thank Mark and Craig, and go to the website, Check out their web, what they have to say. Look at Marc's photographs. Get the book, The UFO Repeaters. Go to Carla's shop, get your hair cut. Look at the paintings on the wall. And listen to all the shows on the PSN Radio Network with the Jackal. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Especially
Good night.
Thank you.
the outer edge.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.